Hey folks, Mario Cavolo here. Welcome to the Dragon Roars On. This video is immediately with a word of gratitude and hats off to Mike Beda at Huaxia Financial in Shanghai. I had the pleasure last week of doing my first author keynote of 2019. I was asked to be one of the speakers at the Hua Finance 2019 Economic Council. There was almost 150 people gathered up at Atlas Business Suites over in Shanghai, near People's Square. We had a great time. The other presenters, Kay and Rob, talked about not only what's happening in China, but the fact that because of developments in China, Vietnam is next. So that's very, very exciting as well. So right now, this is a very quick introduction to what I'm going to do. The author keynote speech I gave for the Huaxia Finance 2019 Economic Council was China, 20 points in 20 minutes. And that's to celebrate, in fact, that this year is my 20th year here in China, on the heels of course, the second China book that I just published of the same name, The Dragon Roars On. I'm very excited right now with graphics, charts, PowerPoint slides. I'm going to present that narration to you. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Please do subscribe, share, and comment. Thanks very much. Let's get started. In fact, today is Chinese New Year's Eve here in China, and while I'm speaking, you may hear some strange bang, 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 pop, pop, pop noises in the background, and that's because all over the cities, all over China, throughout the day and all day long, local people, local neighbors are firing off all different kinds of fireworks, everything from firecrackers to sparklers to Roman candles and lots of other fireworks that make really loud boom, boom, boom noises. Well, point number one I want to share with you. Unfortunately, right now, there's a nauseatingly negative narrative on politics and China. So what you need to do is you need to filter every mainstream headline news story that you see and that you read with your intelligence and your common sense. Wake up, be aware, use your sense. Remove the politics and the negative bias from the self-evident, balanced body of facts and observations that's out there. You have to make a serious effort to do that in everything that you're reviewing. And this is regarding, I hate to say it, but it seems to be a global problem now. It kind of started in the United States, where politics became more and more politically correct, and it's just gotten worse. And regarding China, it's the same. Point number two, what should you be watching? Because there's a lot of economic statistics and points to watch, but my approach is not economics. It's more real-world analysis of what's really going on that's observable with your eyes, like Sherlock Holmes, deductive reasoning. This makes perfect sense. So what should you be watching? Primarily, the state of affairs of the domestic consumer household consumption, and along with that, small business. China is all about small businesses. Unfortunately, all you hear about is the government and the SOEs and communism, and it's just ridiculous. What you have here right now is a population of 1.4 billion people. 1.4 billion people now, they say the country is 52% urbanized, meaning half the population, about 700 billion, are now living in cities. That's first, second, third, and even fourth tier cities. Okay? So this is a very, very important point. Watch the consumer population. Number three, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen are not the China property market. They total only 14% of the country's real estate market of over 250 second, third, and fourth tier cities, with 90% of households owning their home at 4 to 12,000 RMB per square meter. That is about 50 to 150, even $200 a square foot. All right, referencing to your measurement numbers used in the United States. So the broad property market is 86% of the country. That's China, right? Many people say to you, oh, you're in Shanghai? Well, that's not China. Well, so I'm going to say next, regarding China's real estate market, the fact of the matter is, it's never going to crash from current levels. It already had softened up over the last, I'm going to say 3-4 years, okay? And now it's steadied back up. I just shared with you the typical city in China, secondary cities like Chengdu, Chongqing, Wuhan, Changsha, Dalian, Shenyang, Tianjin, so many others. Second and third tier cities. Prices are not crazy. It's average normal life. You can't look at the China real estate market and you can't make the same mistake you make back in America and say Manhattan is the American real estate market. It certainly isn't. Okay? So let me explain to you more clearly. There's 200 million middle-class households. Okay? It's a lot of houses, folks. They have low expenses, including rent, and that's if they don't own their home and have no mortgage. Rent is much lower in China. Healthcare, much lower in China. I'll talk about that separately. Cost of living, food, transportation, and low debt. All these details, I'll clarify for you further. There's low or no mortgage debt, low credit card debt. For the middle class, I'm suggesting to you that here in China, there's still plenty more growth happening for another 10 to 15 years. So we say 10 to 15 more years of blue skies. Okay? Think about the United States, how long over a long period of time that the middle class expanded, right? And it's a matter of economic cycles. You know, China is much closer to the beginning of its economic cycle, whereas in the West it's more mature. And we look at point number 5, okay? Credit card debt is certainly rising, but 95% of credit card balances are still being paid off in full every month. Again, it's a younger economic and banking cycle. Back in America, are 95% of balances being paid off in full every month? No, the average American middle-class family household has 10,000 RMB per month of debt that they're carrying. So here in China, even though the numbers are rising, I think it's up to like 70 billion a month that's being charged on credit cards. Not debit cards, credit cards. But that's still far below U.S. household credit card debt levels. And again, every month, the Chinese are still paying off the balance in full. And let's look at point number 6. There is low or no mortgage debt. Okay. 10, 15, or 20-year mortgages are used if you do have a mortgage here in China, not 30 years. That is a ripoff that Western banks foisted upon you so that you'd pay so much more money in interest to the bank in the first 10 years of the mortgage. It's ridiculous. Okay, so here in China, most people have 10 or 15-year mortgages if they even do have a mortgage. Okay. And about 50% of households have a mortgage. 50% of households don't even have a mortgage. If they do have a mortgage, it's with 30 to 40% down payment, which means there's still plenty of equity. If there are any bad property situations you hear about in the headline news, China market is going to crash, blah, blah, blah. Those are examples or isolated instances. They're the exception, not the rule. Now, point number 7, let's compare this to the United States 2008 property market and financial crisis. From 2000 to 2008, the bankers, in collusion with Wall Street and the government, intentionally gave no qualified 100% subprime mortgages to families who couldn't afford them. And then they pooled those into tranches to supposedly lower the risk. Let's pool them all together, and then we can call those mortgage-backed securities, and then S&P will rate them AAA. And then they created credit default swap insurance on those, and they sold that too. So then they bailed out the billionaires that caused all these problems. Folks, this is what they did. And why did they do it? To make money. They made billions. Wall Street bankers and politicians made billions and caused the meltdown. Number 8, such extreme financial situation does not exist here in China. China is not, meaning the government, the policies and rules that they're rolling out. They're not going to let the same thing happen. They watched and saw what happened. Would you then, when you saw a disaster, would you then let the disaster happen to you? Of course not. So they're putting rules and regulations in place. And the Chinese government, under Xi and under the previous leadership, they will remain and have enough of a focus on maintaining social and financial stability and harmony for the benefit of society, for the masses of Chinese consumer household families. I don't know about you, but I wish American politicians would do the same. They're focused on corporations and profits, and they've decimated the middle class in the process. Okay, back to China. Number 9, there's a huge pad of support to the tune of $30 trillion. Incredible. 200 million homes in China with no mortgage on them, each worth an average of 150,000 US dollars. That's reasonable. Well, 200 million times 150,000, folks, that's $30 trillion. Okay. There are no home equity lines of credit in China. Again, the US subprime crisis. Homeowners had second mortgages. They call them HELOCs, home equity line of credit. First and second mortgage debt to full equity in the value of the house. In China, this doesn't exist at all. China has zero. This market of second mortgage, that line of credit, has not even been touched yet. Number 10, let's pop over to the automotive market. Oh, it's a crisis. Oh, China's economy is in trouble now. Really? Okay, well, growth has flattened in the automotive market at around 2.2 million passenger cars per month. Now, 5 years ago, 80% of cars purchased in China were paid for in cash. Can you believe that? This is by average middle-class people. Now, of course, again, the economy is maturing. About 50% of vehicle purchases are with loans, 50% of purchases are paid for in cash. Okay, with the average middle-class Chinese vehicle costing about 15 to 20,000 US dollars. And keep in mind from the automotive industry that it also creates massive downstream revenue for economic growth for many additional decades to come. Number 11, China's miracle of public transportation. I call it, with Western numbers, 50 miles in 15 minutes for $5. Try that back in America. It just doesn't happen. And what it means is everywhere, every city in China, you've got an amazing, expanding subway system. You can get anywhere you need to go inexpensively by subway and bus. It's common. And this means that for the lower middle class and folks in any country, whether it's European, North America, South America, Australia, China, anywhere in Asia, if you're lower income, life is tough. You're trying to pay the bills. For those who can't afford to purchase a vehicle, they don't actually need one to still be productive and work. In America, you need a car, you can't get a job. So it's an amazing expense that doesn't exist. 11A, I'm cheating a little bit, right? Cheap, efficient healthcare. I mentioned this earlier. Here's the list. Look at this. And this is not with health insurance. There is no national insurance coverage in China. You pay yourself, but it's not expensive. $2 to see a doctor, $10 for an x-ray, $30 for an ultrasound. It's more serious, $60 for a CT scan. It's more serious, we want to see soft tissue, $150 for an MRI. Are you kidding? All of these things are typically done on the same day as needed. Well, except for the MRI, you probably have to make an appointment for an MRI. Come back 2-3 days later. Folks, that's the reality. Okay, the boom boom you hear in the background, again, it's Chinese New Year here today. So enjoy that happiness with me. It's incredible. And when you have more serious illness in China, yes, it can cost a lot of money, and that's a problem. But for most basic healthcare that you need, incredibly inexpensive and efficient, and it's good. I've been using the Chinese healthcare system for 20 years. Number 12, China product quality is through the roof. Looking at vehicles, mobile phones, those are the obvious. Even things like education, okay? Other products, household products. But what I want you to understand is that quality was always great. Quality was always possible in China if the client wanted it and was willing to pay for it. So when you say, oh, cheap Chinese goods, it's not because they're cheap Chinese good made cheap in China. It's because that's what the client ordered. If the client ordered the product to be made high quality, China's completely, absolutely capable of that. Okay, and I'll show you some products in just a second here to give you some examples of that. And mostly I'm referring to electronics type products, but also building, construction, and furniture. On the left, one of the business projects that I promote is China audiophile gear. That turntable you see in the middle is a Mari brand. It is super precision German engineered quality for $750. On the bottom, you have a premier pure Class A amplifier for a couple $1,000s, made by a famous Chinese brand named Jungsun. On the right, you see the world-known, world-renowned in the production industry handheld audio studio recorder, the Zoom H4n. Where do you think it's made? It's an amazing precision device. It's made in China. So Chinese manufacturing and brands have always been capable of super high quality if you want it. I shouldn't need to remind anyone about the story of Apple. When Steve Jobs needed Gorilla Glass, only China was able to make it happen and do it on such a scale in the manufacturing sector. Number 13, back to the cars. Okay, because this has to do with cars and the households. The vehicle household saturation in China is only about 55% with one vehicle. That means only about 55% of homes in China already own a car, and they only own one vehicle. Well, how does that compare to the United States? U.S. household vehicle penetration is about 85%. Right? Most houses in America, homes in America, already have cars. They have multiple cars. If 3 adults live in the house, how many homes are in the car? How many cars are in the home? 3, one for each adult who needs their car to go to work. What a crazy expense, because there's no cheap, convenient public transportation like there is here in China. And in China, they're expanding the public transportation system. It's amazing. It's a miracle, like I said. Electric cars are coming. I expect to see more hybrids than pure electric here in the China market. Number 14. The need for foreign brand status is sharply declining amongst the middle class. They are happy, for example, in the mobile phone business to buy Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi, Huawei instead of Apple. This is understandable both in terms of societal cycles and economic cycles. Look, let's again skip the politics for a moment. Let's be happy for Chinese families, okay? Let them enjoy and have their time in the sun. That's a fair thing to say. You know, the United States had a wonderful, amazing post-World War II boom through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Great, wonderful. The rise of the amazing middle class. That's what happened in the United States. Well, it happened in China over the last 15 years. I was here for it. It was incredible. And they're enjoying that. But it takes a while mentally to catch up. And they have caught up. And so they know they should be proud of their country and proud of their brands, and they're becoming that way more and more every day. Number 15, China announces stimulus and incentives to boost. You know, even McKinsey retracted their own pessimistic view. They said, we're likely to see stronger demand for infrastructure, business investment, and consumer spending in 2019 in China than we originally anticipated. Well, where were you, McKinsey? I don't understand. Okay, I knew that was going to happen. And we've seen that the Chinese government offers lots of stimulus along the way as needed to keep promoting the economy. I noted in 2015 that the government was promoting and supporting small businesses with many incentives and promotions. In 2019, they're doing even more. Can you imagine this? In January 2015, 4 years ago, 348,000 newly registered companies in China, just in the 1 month. Now that number is certainly lower now, but it's still an enormous number of new businesses, and the government efforts are there to continue streamlining the startup process for small businesses, entrepreneurs, people who want to make money on their own. Does that sound like communism to you? No, of course not. It's a market-driven capitalist system in many, many ways. And that leads to number 16. Okay, here we are in 2019. Is China's economy slowing? Well, of course it is. After 15 years of blistering growth, okay, in any economic cycle, especially when you hit the 15, 30, and 60-year economic cycles, right? Those are well known, okay? You can't go against the reality of the bell curve and of cycles, okay? And so China's economy is slowing, and the government is coming out with new incentives, and they're focusing them on small businesses and entrepreneurs. There was a 30,000 RMB, 4,500 per month tax exemption for small businesses. They've just increased it to 100,000. Okay. If your company happens to be profitable, okay, then the taxable income, if it's 1 million, you only get taxed on 25% of that. If it's 2 million, you only get taxed on 50% of that. So all of that's focused on small businesses. Now, moving on to a little bit of politics, not really politics, but economics. Number 17, the Xi-Trump trade issue. Good heavens. Again, more ridiculous negative rhetoric, especially for the media that hates President Trump, etc., etc., etc. I don't care about any of that. I'm telling you point blank, and it's happening. The Xi-Trump trade issue will be fine. Very soon you're going to see them coming out that they're making great deals. Why? Because they have to. Mutual destruction is a very bad idea. Nobody's interested in that. Nobody's interested. Let me say it one more time. Nobody's interested in mutual destruction. Okay? They're going to make great deals together. It's going to be positive news. Donald Trump was 100% correct to start getting tough on China because they took advantage of the corporatists in America who sold out the country. Okay, and that's the truth, and that's why the middle class has gotten decimated, right? That's all facts. We know what it is. All right, now, expect to see good things between Xi and Trump. Okay, number 18. In China, there's an enormous off-the-books cash economy, and that's the topic of my first book on China, published in 2014, China, The Truth of Trillions in a Culture of Cash. Okay. America has an off-the-books cash economy too, but it's maybe about 15% of GDP. In China, back then I estimated that the off-the-books cash economy in China is probably 50% or more of GDP. Well, that money, with all of the new regulations and rules and incentives for small businesses to register, what does that mean? It means that what was previously off-the-books cash economy is now flowing onto the books and into the GDP figures. Number 19, related to what I just said, statistics are becoming more accurate. Rules and regulations are becoming clarified, updated, and enforced. In other words, China has and is modernizing as a country. Okay, this is a good thing. Now, so I don't understand why then the news comes out with and says, President Xi's administration is doing this and doing that, and they're cracking down on this, cracking down. Well, excuse me. That's a good thing. Okay, they're supposed to be cracking down. That's what you want. Overall, greater clarification, enforcement, and transparency of rule and law. Rule of law. You can hear Americans saying this. We have rule of law here. But then when China starts implementing rule of law, you call it a crackdown. Come on, give me a break. Okay? It's good for the long-term stability of the economy. And number 20, I saved the best for last. The ghost towns that aren't. So back in 2012, I specifically remember a 60 Minutes program out of Australia about, and again, it was the same old thing about the very negative picture of China and China's ghost towns and China's economy is going to collapse. Yeah, blah, blah. Okay. And then about 2 to 3 years ago, very well-known market research company CLSA out of Hong Kong, they went and sent a team on the ground back to those ghost towns to see what state they were in. And they're all filled up. Of course they're all filled up. I told you they were going to be all filled up. So what's going on here? What's going on is that China is no different than the United States or any other country. When you have urban development, you need to have a 10 to 20 year window in mind for long-term urban development. I'm not saying they haven't overbuilt. Currently now, what's the new rhetoric now that the ghost towns are filled up? Oh, no, they're not. There's 65 million empty apartments. Well, okay, if a country is urbanizing and there's still 65 million empty apartments, but it's a country that's urbanizing of 1.4 billion people, okay? Compared to America, that's 4 times the population. So I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's a drag on the economy, but it's not a disaster. So, folks, in conclusion, yes, China is slowing down after 15 blistering years of growth, unprecedented. 600 million, 700 million people, even you could say 1 billion people, up, including everyone out of poverty. It's a unprecedented historical economic miracle. It's not without its problems, okay? It's getting tougher and it's slowing, but it's an incredibly powerful and growing economy and society here for the next 20 years. Well, I'll ask to be forgiven, dear friends, for that narration taking 26 minutes instead of 20 minutes. However, I'm very happy with the information flow, so I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to edit it. Please do subscribe and hit the notification button. We're a brand new YouTube channel on many, many topics related to China. It's very important to get clear and accurate and realistic information out there about China. If you appreciate it, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.